It's Friday, so while this isn't exactly a Hawaiian shirt, it's close enough. So, in my earlier videos, I talked about this book a lot, The Creature from Jekyll Island, A Second Look at the Federal Reserve. And this book really was my first in-depth look at the Federal Reserve. I always thought it was interesting that despite having a degree in accounting, that I took courses in finance, economics, accounting. I had lots of courses in general history, yet the Federal Reserve was barely covered in any of these things. So I really knew nothing about the Federal Reserve. So essentially this book right here was my first really delve into the Federal Reserve. And he gives an opinion on the Federal Reserve. And we've seen a lot of this opinion before, especially with the precious metals, blogosphere, and so forth. And then I read an article by Martin Armstrong, or it was a post yesterday, May 30th, 2013. And Martin Armstrong gives a different opinion on the Federal Reserve. Now, Martin Armstrong, I followed him for several years, maybe four or 5 years or so, and I think he's been spot on in a lot of his analysis and where he thinks things are headed. I know that the public has a short memory when it comes to predictions, and this includes the alternative media, not just the mainstream media. It seems that most people don't want any accountability from their pundits. Accountability, I mean, when people make price predictions and promises and they're wrong, they just don't talk about it anymore. They go ahead and make a new set of promises, and when those are wrong, they don't talk about it anymore. When I say accountability, I mean people keep a track record of their predictions and promises, saying, okay, here's my spreadsheet. I said this, and it happened or it didn't happen, right? If someone doesn't do that and they're giving you predictions and promises, I suggest you completely discard this predictions and promises. Only if they keep a record of what they've said in the past can you trust that someone's making predictions and promises. Okay, so going back to Martin Armstrong here, right? He, he's anti, kind of government. He's anti-Marxist and so forth. But he has an interesting take on the Federal Reserve, and I don't completely share his opinion, but his post is called "We Lost Our Central Bank." He says, "I have stated numerous times that a central bank is essential. Banks take depositors' money on demand, but lend long term. When a crisis hits, depositors want their cash, and the banks has assets but no cash. That was why the Fed was created, with an elastic money supply authority." So he says his big point is the Fed was correctly designed insofar it would stimulate the economy by purchasing corporate paper, not government paper. He puts that in capital locks. So he says the problem with the Fed is that the Fed buys government paper, and he says that's where the problem is. He says he's saying if the Fed buys private paper, that's okay. And so he goes through here. He says that so essentially in the book here, his premise is that the Federal Reserve Act was snuck in, and it was deception, where the politicians were hoodwinked and the people were hoodwinked into putting this in. And kind of I'm reading with Martin Armstrong and others, is that the wealthy and the rich, they really wanted a central bank, right? Martin Armstrong is kind of a wealthy guy. He represents that thought process. He has wealthy clients. He's a successful trader guy, and he says the Federal Reserve was a good thing, the way it was designed. So I know that when the Federal Reserve Act was created, they had to change the language and so forth. But for something like that to get passed, there had to be a strong support from the money powers, right? The money powers wanted that, and the money powers got that. So it wasn't like the world was, quote, hoodwinked. What it was it was saying who's in control, right? At that point, the wealthy were in control of the world and not the governments for how this happened. And that's kind of my opinion. Now, I'm not saying that's a great thing. I'm just kind of saying that's kind of how it appears. Because from what I've talked to the wealthy people, pretty much all of them like the Federal Reserve. I mean, except for the wealthy people who have a play on like precious metals and on contrarian investments, pretty much all the wealthy people of the world seem to like this Federal Reserve. I mean, because it protects them, right? So, I know, and what Martin Armstrong said is the problem is that here he goes. Then comes the 2007 crash. Now the Fed is supposed to support every sector within the economy, and by no means anything close to what it's supposed to be. It is not a pure central bank. He says now it sterilizes the wrong decisions of Congress, so Congress does as it likes, and the Fed has to clean up. So he has an interesting opinion on this, and I think it's something to think about, and I've been thinking about what he says, and as I said, I don't think he's completely right, but he's giving me food for thought. And here's one thing too now, right? I've been looking at a lot of this stuff about monetary theory for an extra 4 or 5 years. 4 years ago, I considered myself more knowledgeable on this kind of stuff than today, yet I know a lot more today than before. It was kind of like my arrogance, right? I thought that I could read a thick book, I could watch a few videos and see a few blogs, and then all of a sudden I was completely educated on the matter, and I was some kind of mini expert. The fact of the matter is, yes, I had read more than the vast majority of the public had read. I had seen things about history that the vast majority of the public had not, but in no way did that make me an expert. And I suggest if you want to do well with your investing in finances, I suggest that you detach yourself from thinking you're any kind of expert in anything, right? It is possible to do well with your investments and not consider yourself a great expert. In fact, I think that if you consider yourself a great expert in something, then that's probably a detriment to the learning process. Okay, thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something.